Are you a dark dreamer? Jack Ketchum undeniably is. Jack Ketchum is a former actor, teacher, and literary agent with a cult following of readers around the world. Amongst his most devoted fans is Stephen King, who has compared his work to be on a par with such best-selling writers as Thomas Harris, James Ellroy, and Clive Barker. Ketchum's unsettling work is considered to be on the cutting edge of horror and psychological suspense. Amongst his most acclaimed novels are Off-Season, The Girl Next Door, Cover, Hide and Seek, and Red. Ketchum recently invited us to his apartment in New York, where he agreed to reveal some, if not all, of his secrets, including perhaps the true identity of the man behind the pseudonym of Jack Ketchum. What does it mean to you to be called a dark dreamer?
Actually, you asked me a question once at the very end of an interview that went with The Girl Next Door, where you said something about what do I believe in, what's my religion, and my line, which I thought was, for me, unimaginably inspired, I said, the dark is my church. Don't know where that came from, but it's true. When I was a young boy, I looked around for belief and for faith. I was trying to find Jesus. I was the product of a broken marriage, good people, but who shouldn't have lived together. So I looked around to try to find ways to solve that, to patch that relationship together. So I looked for a lot of religion very early on. Didn't really find it in any of the conventional ways, but I did find it in the dark. And I remember going to Greece my first time in 1977 and going into a cistern and feeling gods there and feeling dark gods there, old gods, Mycenaean gods. I felt the same sorts of things in the Maine woods in the dark of night, sitting around a campfire. And that goes back to my boyhood. And this phrase that you elicited from me, the dark is my church. In that way, I'm a dark dreamer. What comes out in me in the dark is the best of me. It's my dreams, it's my fantasies. And they're not necessarily violent ones. They're often pacific ones, but they're mysterious.
When the critics describe your work, they often use the term ultra-violent. Is that how you feel?
Well, yeah, in a way. I mean, I've used violence close up and personal, especially in my first book, Off-Season. The whole notion of that book was to do what I had seen in horror movies in the 70s and early 60s, which was to get violence up close and personal in your face.
Most people aren't aware that Jack Ketchum is in fact a pseudonym. Why do you use that name, and how did it come about?
Jack Ketchum himself is a member of the Hole in the Wall gang, was a member of the Hole in the Wall gang, thank God, the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid group. And he was colorful, and he was stupid, and he sounded like a good idea, a good name for a horror writer, Jack Ketchum. I like threes, boom, boom, boom. And so I kept Jack Ketchum. Jack had great last words. I'll be in hell before you finish breakfast, boys. Let her rip. And they did, and his head went one way and his body went the other because they had miscalculated his weight. I just liked Jack. So he became my nom de gore.
You have an international reputation as a so-called cult writer. How does that work for you?
I don't know. The Japanese have been very, very good to me over the past few years. And I thought, well, okay, I'm violent. If you see some Japanese pinku movies, they're pretty violent. But the third book that they bought was Red, which is my least violent book. It's a sweet book, as Jack Ketchum books go, and it's got a lot of heart, and it's doing well.
What is Red about, please?
Red is again, it was based on a true story. A lot of my stuff has a reality base. A friend of mine had seen a soundbite on CNN about this old man. This old man was being interviewed. His dog had been shot by 3 kids who came down to a river. He was fishing in a river, and they asked him for money. He didn't have any money, so they said, "Oh shit, screw the dog," and they popped the dog. And I happen to love animals. I've got 4 cats. I love dogs, and I often proceed from a point of view of if something pisses me off, it's something I want to write about. Animal rights are important to me. I see animals as valuable as people, and that made me think, well, what if it was Clint Eastwood's dog? What would Clint do? What if he was relentless? This old man was relentless to the degree that he got on CNN. He had realized, and the point of the show was that he had tried to go through the courts, found he could get no satisfaction through the courts, and he was trying his last ditch effort was to go on the air and see if he could get sympathy from people, to get justice that way. I don't know how he fared. I never was able to follow that up. I hope and I wish him well, but I suspect he didn't do well at all, because an old dog ain't worth much. You got a Palomino stallion, you'll get paid. Got an old personal dog, doesn't matter. Anyway, I wrote this book, and I wrote it from a very warm and caring point of view. And the Japanese just went, "I like it." Don't know why. So I don't know how to explain that exactly. There are some strange anomalies in where I'm published and where I'm not. The Italians have published me, the Germans have not. The French have published me, the Spanish have not. I don't know, I'll figure this out as I go along. I'm just happy to have what I got.
Is Off Season, in fact, the darkest book you've ever written?
No, The Girl Next Door is the darkest book I've ever written.
Why is that?
Because it's based on Off Season was based on a old true crime, Sawney Bean on the coast of Scotland. But this is based on a much more recent one. Excuse me, and it's a truly awful crime perpetrated by a woman upon a woman, with a lot of kids involved. And I tried to do it as graphically as I could without turning it into pornography. I knew I was skating a line there. It was a very fine line, and paid far more attention to that line than I've ever paid any attention to anything since. It was important to me that this be seen as a challenge almost to the reader. That if you turn the page, this is so extreme that you're culpable in the crime. You turn that page, you may be going into something you don't want to go into. Dare ya, dare ya, dare ya, dare ya, always. And a lot of people did. And I'm glad they did, because I think it's a moral book. I think it's a book that I wrote from a position of great pain and tenderness. My mother had just died at the point I wrote it. It was a memory play in a lot of ways, because I set this particular crime, which had happened 20 years after the date of my novel. I set it in my hometown. And I remembered a lot of all that stuff that went on in the 50s, and the sort of dark side of the 50s. And that all got into the book. The hypocrisy, the shielding, the fear of being known, and especially with an adolescent boy who is my main character, being known, letting himself be known, letting his voice speak. He sees an awful lot of awful things happen to a young girl, and he doesn't stop it. And what I'm positing is, you, reader, would you have stopped it? Would you have dared stop it? Or would you have been titillated by this so much you'd have gone with it? I was one of those guys who sat in their room and wrote all day. Didn't pay any attention to the reviews. Didn't even know there were any. I wasn't getting any feedback from my publishers, so I had no idea. You came up to me at the first convention I ever went to and said, "Hey, I made your career."
Which is the truth.
Yeah. because you wrote a really positive review about Off Season in Fangoria. And I
Went
knew,
out for 2
and
columns.
I thought, who the hell is this guy? But went out for 2 columns, but they were positive 2 columns instead of negative 2 columns. And so perhaps you in fact did. I don't know. But people certainly have read the book, and I'm really glad it's back in print again. This version is the unexpurgated version.
And why is that? Why is
Well,
that?
as violent as the original one was, I wanted my ending even darker, very much like the darkest ending, the dark ending in Night of the Living Dead, where you think your protagonists are getting out clean, and they just don't. And that was my original version. They said to me at Ballantine, "You can't do this. These people have been through too much. You must let somebody come through unscathed." And I said, "Why? That's the point. We don't always live through these traumas. We don't always live through these nightmares. Sometimes it just doesn't work out for us." Well, they didn't let me do that. Now I got it.
Join me here again, on the wild side of the imagination, where a sense of wonder and a feeling of terror can often intersect. You'll find us waiting here, the Dark Dreamers.